The vampire king ordered the execution of a thief until he saw she was protecting a starving baby. Wait, before the next revelation happens. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. The throne room of Blackthorn Castle had witnessed 1,000 executions, but none quite like this. King Lucien Blackthorn, ancient sovereign of the Northern Territories and lord of the vampire clans, leaned forward on his obsidian throne. His crimson eyes narrowed at the peculiar sight before him. The girl couldn't have been more than 19 or 20, her dress little more than rags, her bare feet bleeding on his polished floor. But it was the bundle in her arms that gave him pause. A human infant, perhaps 6 months old, with skin pale as moonlight and lips tinged blue with hunger. "You stand accused of theft," his chancellor announced, his voice echoing through the vaulted chamber. "Stealing from the royal provisions, bread, milk, and salted meat. The penalty is death." The girl said nothing. She simply stared at Lucien with eyes the color of a storm-tossed sea, defiant even in the face of annihilation. The baby in her arms had quieted, exhausting itself from crying, and now made only small whimpering sounds that seemed impossibly loud in the silent hall. Lucien rose from his throne, his movements fluid and predatory. He was tall, over 6 feet, with black hair that fell past his shoulders and a face that could have been carved from alabaster. His court watched with bated breath. The vampire king was not known for mercy. "Speak," he commanded, his voice soft but carrying absolute authority. "Before I tear the life from your body, tell me why you dared to steal from me." The girl's jaw clenched. For a moment, Lucien thought she would remain silent, accept her death with that infuriating dignity. But then she spoke, and her voice was rough, raspy from thirst and screaming. "Because she was dying. The child is not yours." It wasn't a question. Lucien could smell the difference in their blood, could see the lack of familial resemblance. "No." The girl's arms tightened around the infant. "Her mother was my friend, Elara. She died 3 days ago in childbirth. The midwife wanted to leave the baby in the forest for the wolves. I couldn't." Her voice cracked. "I couldn't let that happen." "So you stole from me." Lucien descended the steps of his dais, closing the distance between them. His guards tensed, hands on their weapons, but he waved them back. "You knew the law. You knew the punishment." "I knew." The girl lifted her chin higher, and Lucien caught the glint of tears in her eyes, though none fell. "But what kind of person would I be if I let a baby starve when I could do something about it? Even if that something meant stealing from a monster?" A ripple of shock moved through the court. No one spoke to the vampire king in such terms. Lucien's second-in-command, Lady Morgana, a vampire of 3 centuries, stepped forward with murder in her eyes. "How dare you?" "Enough." Lucien raised a hand, silencing her instantly. He continued his approach until he stood directly before the kneeling girl. This close, he could see the desperation carved into her face, the hollows beneath her cheekbones that spoke of her own hunger. She had given what little she had to the child, he realized. The stolen food had all gone to keeping the infant alive. "What is your name?" he asked quietly. Seraphina. The defiance in her eyes flickered, replaced briefly by confusion. Seraphina Ashwood. And the child? She has no name yet. Her mother died before. Seraphina swallowed hard. Before she could name her. Lucian stared down at the infant. The baby's eyes had opened, pale blue, unfocused, but aware enough to sense the predator looming above. Yet she didn't cry. She simply gazed up at him with that unsettling wisdom newborns sometimes possessed. Something twisted in Lucian's chest, something he hadn't felt in over 300 years. It was uncomfortable, this sensation, unwelcome. He was a king, a creature of darkness and blood. He had built his empire on fear and absolute control. Mercy was weakness, compassion was a liability. And yet, "Take them to the East Tower," he said abruptly, turning away. "The girl is not to be harmed. See that they are both fed, cleaned, and given proper clothing." The silence that followed was deafening. "My lord," Lady Morgana's voice was tight with barely concealed outrage. "The law?" "I am the law." Lucian's tone brooked no argument. "And I have made my decision. The girl will remain in the castle until I determine her ultimate fate, the child as well." He began walking back toward his throne, but Seraphina's voice stopped him. "Why?" Lucian paused, not turning around. It was a question he couldn't fully answer, even to himself. Perhaps it was the girl's fierce courage, so rare in humans. Perhaps it was the way she had chosen certain death over abandoning a helpless child. Or perhaps it was something else entirely, something he didn't care to examine too closely. "Because," he said finally, "I am curious to see if your noble self-sacrifice extends beyond a single act of theft. We shall see if you are truly as righteous as you pretend, Seraphina Ashwood." With that, he swept from the throne room, leaving his bewildered court to carry out his orders. The East Tower had been unused for decades, but the servants worked with supernatural speed to make it habitable. By the time Seraphina was escorted up the winding stone stairs, arms still wrapped protectively around the infant, the chambers had been transformed. Fresh linens covered the bed, a fire crackled in the hearth, and on the table sat more food than Seraphina had seen in months: bread, cheese, fruit, roasted meat, milk, and wine. "His Majesty has commanded that you be given whatever you require," the head servant, a middle-aged vampire woman named Helena, informed her crisply. "Food, clothing, medical attention, you need only ask." Seraphina didn't respond. She was too busy staring at the milk, her hands trembling as she realized she could finally feed the baby properly. Helena's expression softened slightly. "There's a cradle by the bed, and clean cloth for swaddling. I'll send up a basin of warm water so you can bathe the child." She paused. "And yourself, those wounds need tending." Only then did Seraphina remember her back, the flesh torn open by the whip before she'd been dragged before the king. The adrenaline that had sustained her was fading, and pain crashed over her in waves. "Thank you," she managed, and was surprised to find she meant it. Helena nodded and left, closing the heavy door behind her. Seraphina heard the click of a lock, but at this moment she didn't care if she was prisoner or guest. The baby was whimpering again, rooting desperately for sustenance. With shaking hands, Seraphina prepared a makeshift bottle, soaking a clean cloth in the warm milk and letting the infant suckle on it. It was crude but effective. The baby latched on immediately, her tiny hands grasping at Seraphina's fingers with surprising strength. "It's all right," Seraphina whispered, tears finally falling now that they were alone. "You're safe. I promise you're safe." But even as she said it, she wondered if she was lying. They were in a vampire's castle, at the mercy of a creature who could kill them both with barely a thought. The king had spared them, yes, but for how long, and for what purpose? She looked down at the infant in her arms, the child she had risked everything to protect. The baby's eyes were closed now, her small face relaxed in contentment as she fed. She was so perfect, so innocent. Serafina had known Alara for less than a year, but in that time they had become sisters in all but blood, two orphaned girls surviving in a harsh world by relying on each other. When Alara had died, screaming and bleeding, the baby emerging blue and silent until Serafina had rubbed her back and breathed life into her tiny lungs, she had made a vow. This child would live. This child would have the chance neither she nor Alara had been given, even if it cost Serafina everything. Lucian stood in his private study, staring out the window at the moon-washed landscape below. He could still see the girl's face in his mind, that mixture of terror and defiance. Most humans cowered before him, as they should. But Serafina Ashwood had looked at him like she was daring him to be the monster everyone claimed he was. "You're making a mistake." He didn't need to turn to know Lady Morgana had entered. She moved like a shadow, her presence barely disturbing the air. "Am I?" "The law exists for a reason, Lucian. If you start making exceptions, the humans will see it as weakness. They'll steal more, rebel more. The fragile peace we've maintained will crumble." "The girl didn't steal for herself," Lucian said quietly. "She stole to save a life." "And what of it?" Morgana moved to stand beside him, her reflection ghostly in the window. "Humans die every day. That's the nature of their existence, brief and brutal. You cannot save them all." "I'm not trying to save them all." Lucian finally turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "But I can save this one." Morgana studied him with ancient eyes. She had been with him since the beginning, since he had taken the throne by force and forged the northern territories into a unified kingdom. She knew him better than anyone, which made her next words all the more cutting. "This isn't about the girl or the child, is it?" Lucian's jaw tightened. "Don't." "Isabella has been dead for 2 centuries, Lucian. When will you—" "I said don't." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Frost formed on the windows. "We will not speak of her." Morgana bowed her head in acquiescence, but not before Lucian caught the pity in her eyes. He hated that look, hated the reminder that even after 200 years, the wound remained fresh. Isabella, his wife, his beloved, the human woman who had seen past the monster to the man beneath, who had loved him with a fierceness that rivaled the sun, and who had died because of that love, murdered by those who thought humans and vampires should never mix. He had razed 3 cities in his grief, had bathed in the blood of those responsible, had sworn never to make himself vulnerable to such pain again. And he had kept that vow. For 2 centuries he had been the perfect king, ruthless, efficient, untouchable. He had taken lovers, but never companions, had sired progeny, but never children of the heart. He had buried everything soft and human within himself, and become the creature his subjects needed him to be. So why, then, had he spared the girl? Why did the sight of her protecting that infant make something in his chest ache? "Keep watch on them," he told Morgana quietly, "but do not interfere. I want to see what she does, who she truly is. And if she tries to escape, she won't. Lucian was certain of this, though he couldn't explain why. Not while the child depends on her. Seraphina Ashwood is many things, but she is not a coward. Morgana left without another word, and Lucian returned to the window, watching the moon trace its path across the sky. Somewhere in the tower above, a girl who had called him a monster was feeding an orphaned infant, unaware that her simple act of courage had awakened something in him he thought long dead. Somewhere in the darkness, his past and present were colliding, and Lucian had the unsettling feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. 3 days passed in the tower, and Seraphina began to feel almost human again. The wounds on her back healed with surprising speed, aided by a strange salve Helena brought her. The infant, whom Seraphina had begun privately calling Hope, though she hadn't spoken the name aloud, grew stronger with proper nourishment. Her color improved, her cries became more robust, and she even smiled once, a gummy, toothless expression that made Seraphina's heart swell. But the uncertainty gnawed at her. The king hadn't returned. No one explained what would happen next. She was fed, clothed, and cared for like an honored guest, yet she remained a prisoner, locked in a tower with a child who depended entirely on her. On the 4th morning, the door opened, and instead of Helena, King Lucian himself stood in the doorway. Seraphina scrambled to her feet, instinctively placing herself between him and the cradle where Hope slept. Lucian raised an eyebrow at the gesture. "You still fear I mean to harm the child?" "I don't know what you mean to do," Seraphina replied, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "You spare us, feed us, and then disappear. Why?" "I told you. I was curious." He stepped into the room, and despite her resolve to show no fear, Seraphina took an involuntary step back. He noticed, and something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment? "I wanted to see if your courage was genuine or merely a performance before your execution." And Seraphina's voice came out steadier than she felt. "What have you concluded?" Lucian moved to the cradle, looking down at the sleeping infant. Hope was bundled in soft blankets, her tiny face peaceful in slumber. "I have concluded," he said slowly, "that you are either the most foolishly noble human I have ever encountered, or you have some hidden motive I have yet to discern." "There is no hidden motive," Seraphina clenched her fists. "I loved Alara like a sister. Her daughter deserves a chance to live. That's all." "That's all?" Lucian turned to face her fully, and Seraphina was struck anew by the otherworldly beauty of him. In the morning light streaming through the tower windows, he seemed almost angelic, despite the predatory grace of his movements. Most humans wouldn't risk their lives for a child not their own, especially not in times like these, when survival is difficult enough for oneself. "Then most humans are cowards," Seraphina shot back. "I won't apologize for caring about someone other than myself." A smile tugged at the corner of Lucian's mouth, so brief she almost missed it. "No, I don't suppose you will." He clasped his hands behind his back, assuming a more formal posture. "I have a proposition for you, Seraphina Ashwood." Her heart began to race. "What kind of proposition?" "You will remain here, in the castle. You will serve as the child's guardian and caretaker. In exchange, you will both have everything you need: food, shelter, education for the girl as she grows. You will be under my protection, which means no one in this kingdom will dare harm either of you." It sounded too good to be true. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Lucian was quiet for a long moment, his crimson eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Amusement," he said finally, "curiosity satisfied. And perhaps," he paused, as if the next words were difficult to form, Perhaps a reminder that not all humans are as contemptible as I have come to believe. Serafina didn't know what to make of that. A vampire king who wanted to be reminded of humanity's worth? It seemed absurd. And yet there was something in his expression, a shadow of old pain, that suggested his words held more truth than she understood. "And if I refuse?" she asked quietly. "Then you are free to leave, both of you." Lucien gestured toward the door. "I will provide supplies for your journey and enough coin to see you settled somewhere far from here. You will never see me again." Serafina looked at the door, then at Hope's cradle, then back at the vampire king. "You would really let us go? Just like that?" Just like that. It was tempting to leave this place, to take Hope somewhere safe, somewhere without monsters and ancient curses. But even as the thought formed, she recognized it for the lie it was. There was nowhere truly safe, not for two penniless women, one of them an infant. The world beyond these walls was harsh, unforgiving. Here, at least, they would have protection, resources, a chance for Hope to grow up without constantly worrying about starvation or violence. And there was something else, something Serafina barely wanted to acknowledge. She was curious about him, too. About the vampire king who had spared them when he could have killed them, who looked at Hope with something almost like longing, who spoke of being reminded that humans were not contemptible, as if he desperately wanted to believe it. "I accept your proposition," she said, "but I have a condition of my own." Lucien's eyebrows rose. "Bold to make demands of me? You said we would be under your protection. I want that promise made in blood." A true smile crossed his face now, revealing the sharp points of his fangs. "You want a blood oath? Do you even understand what you're asking? I've heard the stories. A blood oath cannot be broken, not by vampire or human. If you swear it, I'll know Hope and I are truly safe here." "Clever girl." Lucien extended his hand, palm up. "Very well." "I, Lucien Blackthorn, King of the Northern Territories, swear upon my blood and my name that Serafina Ashwood and the child in her care will be protected within my domain. No harm shall come to them by my hand or by any who serve me, for as long as they wish to remain here. This I vow." As he spoke, a small blade appeared in his other hand, drawn from somewhere within his coat. He drew it across his palm, and dark blood welled up, almost black in the morning light. He held his bleeding hand out to Serafina. She hesitated only a moment before stepping forward and placing her hand in his. His skin was cold, impossibly smooth, and the moment their blood mingled, she felt a surge of power rush through her, alien and overwhelming. She gasped, and Lucien steadied her with his free hand. "The oath is sealed," he said softly, and there was something in his voice she couldn't quite identify. "You belong to me now, Serafina. Not as slave or servant, but as one under my protection. And I," he paused, frowning slightly, "I belong to you as well, in a way. Such is the nature of a blood oath. Our fates are intertwined." Serafina pulled her hand back, staring at the thin line on her palm where his blood had mixed with hers. It was already healing, the flesh knitting itself back together with unnatural speed.
What do you mean, intertwined? It means I will know if you are in danger. I will feel your fear, your pain, and you will feel mine, though I doubt I will experience much of either. Lucian turned away, moving toward the door. Helena will instruct you on your new duties. You will take your meals with the household staff until I decide otherwise. The child may remain in your chambers or be placed in the castle nursery. The choice is yours. Wait! Serafina took a step toward him. That's it? You make this enormous vow, bind us together somehow, and then just leave? Lucian glanced back at her, and for a moment, his mask slipped.
She saw weariness in his eyes, and something that might have been fear. I have given you what you wanted, Serafina. Protection, safety. Do not ask me for more than that. He left before she could respond, the door closing quietly behind him. Serafina stood alone in the tower room, her hand still tingling from the blood oath, and wondered what exactly she had just agreed to. Behind her, Hope began to cry, and Serafina pushed aside her confusion to tend to the child. Whatever came next, she had made her choice. They would stay in the castle, under the protection of a vampire king who was far more complex than she had imagined. And somehow, deep in her bones, she knew that choice would change everything. Weeks turned into months, and Serafina fell into a strange new rhythm. The castle, which had seemed so terrifying at first, became familiar. She learned its corridors and courtyards, discovered the library with its thousands of ancient volumes, found the garden where night-blooming flowers created a landscape of ethereal beauty. Hope thrived. The baby grew plump and happy, giggling when Serafina made faces at her, reaching for everything with chubby hands. The castle staff, initially wary of the human woman and her charge, gradually warmed to them. Helena became something like a friend, teaching Serafina the unspoken rules of vampire society. Even Lady Morgana, though still cold and distant, stopped looking at Serafina as if she were an insect to be crushed. But King Lucian remained an enigma. He appeared sporadically, always unexpected. Sometimes Serafina would turn a corner and find him watching her from the shadows. Sometimes he would arrive at the tower unannounced, ostensibly to check on Hope's progress, though he never touched the child. He would simply observe for a few moments, ask a question or two, and then vanish again. Serafina tried not to think about him too much. Tried not to notice the way his presence made her heart race, or how his rare smiles made something warm bloom in her chest. He was a vampire, a creature of darkness and death. She was a human, temporary and fragile. Whatever strange connection the blood oath had forged between them, it meant nothing beyond magical obligation. Or so she told herself. It was on a cold night in late autumn when everything changed. Serafina had put Hope to bed and was sitting by the fire mending one of the baby's gowns when she felt it. A spike of pain so intense it drove the breath from her lungs. She dropped the sewing, clutching her chest, and gasped as images flooded her mind. A courtyard, moonlight on steel, blood on stone. The blood oath. She was feeling what Lucian felt. He was hurt. Serafina didn't think. She threw open the tower door and ran, following the pull of the oath like a compass needle seeking north. She flew downstairs and through corridors, her bare feet slapping against cold stone. Guards called after her, but she ignored them, driven by a terror she didn't understand. She burst into the main courtyard and froze. Lucian was surrounded by 5 figures, all vampires, their faces twisted with rage. He was wounded, a silver blade protruding from his shoulder, his coat torn and bloodied. Even injured, he fought with deadly grace,
moving too fast for human eyes to follow. But the attackers were coordinated, clearly trained, and they were wearing amulets that seemed to neutralize some of his power. "Traitor!" one of them screamed. "You let humans defile our kind. You protect them instead of destroying them." "You are not fit to rule," another snarled, lunging with a silver blade. Lucian caught the attacker's wrist and snapped it, but another blade found his side. He staggered, and Seraphina felt the echo of his pain through the oath, felt his fury, and, underneath it all, his resignation. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to take as many of them with him as possible. He thought he was going to die. And Seraphina realized, with a clarity that stole her breath, that she couldn't let that happen. She didn't have a weapon, didn't have vampire strength or speed, but she had spent 19 years surviving in a brutal world, and she had learned that sometimes the most effective weapon was surprise. She screamed, high and piercing, and ran straight into the melee. "Stop!" The attackers, shocked by the sudden appearance of a human, hesitated for just a moment. That moment was all Lucian needed. He moved like lightning, tearing through two of them with his bare hands, their bodies crumbling to ash. The remaining three fell back, regrouping, but their coordination was broken. "Seraphina, get back!" Lucian roared, but she had already grabbed a fallen sword. Silver, heavy, meant for vampire hands, but serviceable. She swung it wildly at the nearest attacker, who laughed and caught the blade. Until Seraphina let go of the hilt, ducked under his arm, and drove her fist into his throat with all her strength. It wouldn't have stopped a vampire, but it surprised him enough that Lucian could close the distance and end him with brutal efficiency. The last two attackers saw their odds evaporating and fled, disappearing over the castle walls before anyone could stop them. The courtyard fell silent, except for heavy breathing. Seraphina's, not Lucian's. He didn't breathe unless he chose to. Slowly, Lucian pulled the silver blade from his shoulder with a grimace. The wound began healing immediately, but she could see it was still painful. Silver was poison to vampires, Helena had told her. It took longer for them to recover from such injuries. "What?" Lucian said softly, dangerously. "Did you think you were doing?" Seraphina's adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaky and terrified. "You were hurt. I felt it." The oath. "So you ran headlong into a battle that could have killed you?" He stalked toward her, and despite everything, she held her ground. "You could have died, Seraphina. They would have torn you apart just to spite me." "But they didn't." She lifted her chin, meeting his blazing eyes. "I helped." "You helped?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You screamed and grabbed a sword you barely knew how to hold. That's not help, that's suicide. I distracted them. You won because of it. I would have won regardless. You were ready to die." The words burst from her before she could stop them. "I felt it, Lucian. You thought you were going to die, and you didn't care. You were going to let them kill you." The silence that followed was deafening. Lucian stared at her, his expression unreadable, and Seraphina realized she had crossed some invisible line. She had used his name without permission, had seen too deeply into his heart. "You know nothing of what I think or feel," he said finally, his voice hollow. "Don't I?" Seraphina took a step closer, reckless now. "The blood oath goes both ways, remember. I feel what you feel, and what I felt tonight was resignation, acceptance. You were going to let them win. Perhaps I should have." Lucian turned away, his shoulders tight with tension. "Perhaps it would be better for everyone if I—" "Don't you dare!"
Serafina grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. "Don't you dare say that. I know you think you're a monster. Everyone fears you, everyone expects you to be cruel and heartless. But you spared me. You gave Hope and me a home. You made a blood oath to protect us. That's not what monsters do." "You don't understand." Lucien's voice was raw, stripped of its usual authority. "Everything I touch dies, Serafina. Everyone I love turns to ash. I am cursed. And you?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw the naked longing in his eyes. "You are the first person in 200 years who has made me want to be something other than what I am, and that terrifies me." The admission hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Serafina's hand was still on his arm, and she could feel the coldness of his skin, the supernatural strength coiled beneath. She should step back, should remember what he was, what she was, should protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak. Instead, she reached up and touched his face, her palm against his cheek. "I'm not afraid of you," she whispered. "You should be, but I'm not." Lucien closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man starved for contact. "Serafina, you don't know what you're doing." "Yes, I do." And she did. She understood it with perfect clarity. Somewhere between his sparing her life and the blood oath, between his quiet visits to see Hope and his vulnerability tonight, she had stopped seeing him as a monster. She saw the man beneath, the one who had loved and lost, who carried 2 centuries of grief like chains. And she wanted to set him free. "I'm not asking you to love me," she said softly. "I'm just asking you to stop trying to die." Lucien opened his eyes, and they were no longer cold. They burned with an intensity that made her breath catch. "If I do that," he said quietly, "if I let myself feel again, I cannot promise it won't destroy us both. I know. The court will never accept you. There will be more attacks, more danger. I know. And I am still a monster, Serafina. I drink blood. I kill. That will never change. I know." She smiled, despite everything. "You're the monster who saved my life, who gave a home to an orphaned baby, who made a blood oath to protect us. If that's what monsters are like, then I'm not afraid of them." Something broke in Lucien then, some last wall of resistance. He pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her, and buried his face in her hair. They stood like that in the courtyard, surrounded by ash and blood, and Serafina felt through the oath what he was feeling. Relief, terror, hope, desire, all tangled together in a knot so complex she couldn't separate one emotion from another. "You're going to be the death of me," he murmured against her hair. "Or the life of you," she replied. He pulled back just enough to look at her, and then, slowly, carefully, as if she were made of glass, he kissed her. His lips were cold but soft, and the kiss was gentle, almost reverent. It was nothing like what Serafina had expected from a vampire king. It was the kiss of a man who had forgotten how to be tender, relearning the language of affection. When they finally broke apart, Lucien rested his forehead against hers. "If we do this," he said quietly, "there's no going back. The blood oath will deepen, our souls will be bound. You will be mine, and I will be yours, for as long as you live. As long as I live." Serafina repeated the phrase, understanding its weight. She was human. She would age and die while he remained unchanging. Decades together at most, a blink in his immortal existence. "Is that enough for you?" "It will have to be." His voice was rough with emotion. "Because I don't think I can let you go now. You've ruined me, Serafina Ashwood.
completely and utterly. "Good," she said, and kissed him again. The next morning, the entire castle was abuzz with gossip. The king's human ward had run into battle to save him. The king had been seen kissing her in the courtyard. The blood oath between them had deepened into something more. Lady Morgana arrived at Serafina's tower before dawn, her expression unreadable. "He has asked me to train you," she said without preamble. Serafina, who had been feeding hope, looked up in surprise. "Train me? In combat? In vampire politics? In the ways of this court?" Morgana's lips pressed into a thin line. "If you are to be his consort, and make no mistake, that is what you will be, then you must be able to protect yourself. The attack last night was only the beginning. There are those who will never accept a human at the king's side." "I never asked to be his consort," Serafina said quietly. "And yet, here you are." Morgana moved to the window, looking out at the dawn-lit landscape. Lucian loved a human once before. Her name was Isabella. She was kind, beautiful, everything good in this world. And she died because of that love, torn apart by those who thought humans and vampires should remain separate. Serafina felt a chill run down her spine. "I didn't know. Few do. He never speaks of her." Morgana turned back to face Serafina, and for the first time there was something like sympathy in her eyes. "I watched him break after she died. I watched him become the cold, ruthless king he is today. I thought that man was gone forever. But you," she shook her head, "you've brought him back from the abyss. I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse." "Maybe both," Serafina said honestly. "Maybe." Morgana moved toward the door, then paused. "The training begins tomorrow at dawn. Don't be late. And, Serafina, if you truly care for him, you'll learn quickly, because the enemies we face won't hesitate to use you to hurt him." She left, and Serafina sat in silence, Hope gurgling contentedly in her arms. The baby had no idea of the storm brewing around them, the danger that loving the vampire king would bring. But Serafina knew. She had always known, from the moment she accepted his proposition, that this path would be treacherous. She just hadn't expected to care about him so much. The door opened again, and Lucian himself entered. He looked better than he had the night before, his wounds fully healed, his clothing pristine. But there were shadows under his eyes, as if he hadn't rested. "Morgana spoke with you," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes."
He sat in the chair across from her, his posture uncharacteristically uncertain. "I should send you away. For your safety and Hope's. This castle is no place for you, not with what's coming." "But you won't." Serafina met his gaze steadily. "Because you know I won't leave." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Stubborn woman. Stubborn king. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Hope play with her toes, oblivious to the adult concerns swirling around her. "I meant what I said last night," Lucian finally spoke. "I haven't let myself feel anything real in 2 centuries. It's terrifying." "Love usually is," Serafina said softly. He looked up sharply. "I didn't say—" "You didn't have to." She shifted Hope to one arm and reached out with the other, taking his cold hand in hers. "I feel it through the oath, remember? You can't hide from me, Lucian." His fingers tightened around hers. "Then you know how dangerous this is, how much I stand to lose if anything happens to you. And you know that I'm not going anywhere." She squeezed his hand. "We face this together or not at all." Lucian raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You're extraordinary. You know that?" I'm just a girl who stole bread to feed a baby. No, his voice was fierce. You're the woman who reminded me what it means to be alive, even when life is frightening and painful and temporary. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? Hope, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his face from beautiful to breathtaking. The same name you gave to the child. How fitting. Serafina felt tears prick her eyes. We're going to be all right, aren't we? I don't know, Lucien admitted, but I do know that I will fight with everything I have to keep you safe. Both of you. That's a promise. Another oath? A simple promise. Sometimes those matter more. The months that followed were both wonderful and terrifying. Serafina trained with Morgana daily, learning to fight with sword and dagger, learning the intricate politics of vampire society, learning to move through a world that didn't want her there. She was bruised and exhausted constantly, but she improved rapidly, driven by the knowledge that her survival depended on it. Hope continued to thrive, growing from infant to toddler, taking her first steps in the castle gardens while Lucien watched with barely concealed delight. He was careful with the child, always maintaining a slight distance, but Serafina saw how he looked at her, with longing, with love, with the grief of knowing he could never have children of his own. And through it all, her relationship with Lucien deepened. They spent evenings in his study, talking about everything and nothing. He told her stories of his long life, of the world before modern times, of the woman he had loved and lost. She told him about her childhood in the slums, about Ilara and the promise she had made, about her dreams for Hope's future. They were careful, both aware of the scrutiny from the court, but in private, they were simply two people learning to love again after loss. He taught her to dance in the moonlight. She taught him to laugh without bitterness. They were an impossible pair, the vampire king and the human thief, but somehow they worked. Until the night the hunter came. Serafina was in the library with Hope, reading the child a story about a brave knight and a dragon, when the windows exploded inward. Glass rained down, and a figure in black dropped into the room with predatory grace. Not a vampire. Serafina's training kicked in immediately. She knew the difference now. This was something else. A hunter. She could see the silver weapons, the holy symbols, the cold determination in his eyes. "Where is the abomination?" the hunter demanded, his voice rough with a strange accent. Serafina placed herself between him and Hope, her hand going to the dagger Morgana had insisted she carried. "Get out!" The hunter laughed. "The pet speaks. Tell me, girl, does he keep you for blood or for other pleasures? Or is it both?" I said, "Get out!" Serafina drew the dagger, and through the blood oath she sent a desperate cry for help. "Lucien!" She felt his response immediately, rage, fear, and the promise that he was coming. "I'll leave," the hunter said, "once I've taken the vampire king's head. And perhaps yours, too, for lying with a monster." He lunged, faster than any human should move. Serafina barely managed to dodge, pushing Hope's playpen aside. The child began to scream, and the sound seemed to drive the hunter into greater fury. He swung a silver blade at Serafina, and she parried desperately, her training the only thing keeping her alive. But he was stronger, better trained, and he had the advantage of religious fervor driving him. She felt the blade bite into her shoulder, felt her own blood spill hot down her arm. Pain exploded through her, and through the oath she knew Lucien felt it too. "Weak," the hunter spat, "just like the last one. Isabella, wasn't it? She screamed so prettily when we—" He never finished the sentence. Lucien appeared like a demon summoned from hell itself, moving so fast he was a blur.
The hunter had time for one choked gasp before the Vampire King's hand closed around his throat. "You will not," Lucian said, each word dropping like stones into still water. "Speak her name." He crushed the hunter's windpipe, and the man fell, choking and dying. Lucian let him drop, uncaring, and turned to Seraphina. His eyes were wild, feral, barely recognizing her through his rage. "Lucian!" She reached for him, ignoring her wounded shoulder. "I'm all right. We're all right." His gaze focused on her blood, on the wound that was still bleeding, and something in him seemed to break. "You're hurt." "It's not deep. I'll heal." She touched his face, and gradually the wildness faded from his eyes. "He didn't get to hope. We're safe." Lucian pulled her against him, careful of her injury, and she felt him trembling. "When I felt your pain," he whispered, "when I thought I might lose you, I cannot do this, Seraphina. I cannot survive losing you the way I lost her." "You won't lose me." She held him as tightly as she dared. "I'm not going anywhere." But even as she said it, she understood the weight of his fear. The hunter had known about Isabella, had been one of those who killed her or worked with them, which meant the attacks weren't random. They were organized, coordinated, a campaign to destroy everything Lucian loved. And she had just painted a target on her back by becoming the thing he loved most. The next few weeks were tense. Lucian increased security around the castle, assigned permanent guards to Seraphina and Hope, and began hunting down every hunter cell in the kingdom. It was brutal work, and Seraphina could feel the toll it took on him through their bond. He was becoming the monster again, the ruthless king who showed no mercy. She tried to reach him, to remind him of the man beneath the fury, but he was slipping away from her. Consumed by the need to protect her, he was forgetting why that protection mattered in the first place. It was Morgana who finally made Seraphina understand. "He's going to do something terrible," the vampire said quietly one evening. They were in the training room, but for once they weren't sparring. "He's going to destroy every hunter in the kingdom, and probably innocent people along with them. And then he'll hate himself for it, but he'll keep going because the alternative, losing you, is worse than becoming a monster." "What can I do?" Seraphina asked desperately. "How do I stop him?" "You can't stop him." Morgana's eyes were sad. "But you can save him, if you're willing to make the choice." "What choice?" Morgana was silent for a long moment. Then, "He can turn you, make you vampire. You would be immortal, stronger, able to protect yourself. The hunters couldn't harm you as easily. And Lucian wouldn't have to fear losing you to time or violence." The words hit Seraphina like a physical blow. Become a vampire? Give up her humanity? Live forever in darkness? "I can see you're horrified," Morgana said with bitter amusement. "Most humans are." "I'm not horrified," Seraphina said slowly. "I'm thinking." She looked at her hands, still human, still warm. Would I still be me if he turned me? "I don't know," Morgana admitted. "Some vampires lose themselves in the transformation. Some become more themselves than ever. It's different for everyone. And Hope? Could I still care for her? Of course. You just have to be careful not to hurt her. Newborn vampires are difficult to control." Seraphina thought of Hope, now nearly 2 years old, bright and curious and full of life. She thought of the promise she'd made to Alara, to keep the child safe, to give her a good life. How could she do that if she became a creature of blood and darkness? But then she thought of Lucian, slowly destroying himself to keep her safe. She thought of the man he could be, the man she'd glimpsed in quiet moments, if only he wasn't consumed by the fear of losing her.
I need to talk to him, she said. She found Lucian in the throne room, receiving reports from his scouts about hunter movements. He looked exhausted, even for a vampire. His shoulders bowed under the weight of his responsibilities. "Leave us," she said quietly to the gathered court, and to her surprise, they obeyed. Even Lady Morgana slipped out, closing the doors behind her. Lucian looked up at her, and she saw the weariness in his eyes, the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who had been fighting for too long. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "It's not safe. Nowhere is safe, Lucian."
That's what you're learning, isn't it? You can kill every hunter in the kingdom, post guards at every door, and still the danger will find us. Then I'll kill more. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I'll destroy anyone who even thinks about harming you. And what will be left of you when you're done? Seraphina crossed to him, kneeling beside his throne so she could look up into his face. What will be left of the man I love? He flinched at the word. You shouldn't love me. I'm a monster, remember? You said so yourself when we first met. I was wrong. She took his cold hands in hers. Or maybe I was right, and I love you anyway. But this, she gestured at the empty throne room, at the maps covered in blood-red marks indicating hunter locations. This isn't protecting me. This is destroying you. I can't lose you. The words were torn from him, raw and desperate. I can't survive it again, Seraphina. I barely survived losing Isabella. If something happens to you, I will burn this entire world to ash. Then don't lose me. She squeezed his hands. Turn me. Lucian went absolutely still. What? Make me vampire. Make me immortal. Then you won't have to be afraid anymore. No. He pulled his hands away, standing abruptly. Absolutely not. Why not? Because it's a curse. He rounded on her, his eyes blazing. Because you would lose your humanity, your warmth, your very soul. I won't do that to you, Seraphina. I won't damn you to this existence. It's not damnation if I choose it willingly. She stood as well, refusing to back down. You think your existence is a curse? I see a man who has survived 300 years, who built a kingdom, who still has the capacity to love despite everything he's lost. That's not damnation. That's strength. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. She grabbed his arms, forcing him to face her. Explain why becoming like you would be so terrible. Explain why I should prefer to grow old and die while you remain unchanged. Explain why you're willing to destroy yourself to protect me, but won't let me make this choice. Because I love you! The words exploded from him, echoing in the vast throne room. Because you are the best thing to happen to me in 2 centuries, and I will not be responsible for destroying that goodness. I will not watch you lose your humanity piece by piece. I will not. She kissed him, cutting off his words. He resisted for a moment, then gave in, pulling her against him with desperate intensity. When they finally broke apart, Seraphina rested her forehead against his chest. I'm not afraid of becoming vampire, Lucian. I'm afraid of losing you. I'm afraid of watching you become the monster you think you are, just to keep me safe for a few more decades. That's what terrifies me. Seraphina, I love you. She looked up at him, letting him see the truth in her eyes. I love you, and I choose this. I choose forever, if you'll have me. Lucian's hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. If I do this, he said softly, there's no going back. You'll be vampire, immortal, bound to darkness. Are you truly ready for that? I'm ready to be with you, she said simply. Everything else, well, we'll figure out together. He searched her face for a long moment, then, finally, slowly, nodded. It will hurt. The transformation is difficult. I know. You'll need to feed on human blood. I know. And hope, you won't be able to care for her immediately, not until you learn control. That one hurt, but Serafina nodded. Helena will look after her. I trust her. Lucian pulled her close again, and she felt him trembling. I never wanted this for you, he whispered. I wanted you to live your life, grow old naturally, find a human man who could give you children and a normal existence. I never wanted normal. Serafina smiled against his chest. I wanted extraordinary. I wanted you. Then you shall have me. He tilted her head back, exposing her throat. For all eternity, Serafina Ashwood, you shall have me. His fangs descended, and when they pierced her skin, the pain was sharp but brief. Then there was only warmth spreading through her body, and the sensation of her life's blood flowing into him. She felt him drinking deeply, felt her heart beginning to slow, and through the blood oath, she felt his anguish and his love tangled together. Just before darkness claimed her, she felt his wrist pressed to her lips, blood, his blood, flowing into her mouth. She drank instinctively, and the taste was strange, cold and metallic, but somehow right. Sleep, Lucian murmured, cradling her as her body began the transformation. Sleep, my love, and when you wake, well, face eternity together. Serafina's last conscious thought was of hope, and the promise she'd made. She hoped, desperately, that she would still be able to keep it when she woke. The transformation took 3 days. Serafina drifted in and out of consciousness, caught in fever dreams where she was both dying and being born. She saw Ilara, smiling and healthy, telling her it was all right to let go. She saw Hope, grown into a beautiful young woman, safe and happy. She saw Lucian standing alone in an empty throne room, waiting for her. When she finally opened her eyes, the world had changed. Everything was sharper. She could see individual dust motes floating in the air, could hear conversations happening 3 floors below, could smell blood pumping through living hearts. And the hunger? Oh, the hunger was overwhelming, a gnawing emptiness that threatened to consume her. Easy, Lucian's voice, and she turned to find him sitting beside the bed, his hand on her shoulder. Don't move too quickly. Your body is still adjusting. I can hear everything, Serafina whispered, and her voice sounded different, richer somehow. I can smell. She broke off, gasping as the scent of human blood reached her. Is that Hope? She's 3 floors away with Helena, Lucian said calmly. But yes, you can smell her. You can smell every human in the castle. You need to learn to control it before you see her again. The thought of being kept from Hope was agonizing, but Serafina understood. In this state, driven by hunger and instinct, she could hurt the child without meaning to. How long? She asked. Until you learn control? A few weeks, perhaps. It varies. He helped her sit up, and she realized she was stronger now, her movements more fluid. But first, you need to feed properly. Helena has volunteered. No, Serafina shook her head. Not Helena. She's my friend. I can't. You won't hurt her, Lucian assured her. I'll guide you. But you need blood, Serafina. Real blood, or the hunger will drive you mad. It took every ounce of her will, but Serafina nodded. Helena entered the room a moment later, calm and composed, and offered her wrist. It's all right, dear, she said gently. I've done this many times for newly turned vampires. Just be careful with your teeth. With Lucian's hands steadying her, Serafina fed. The taste of blood was strange and wonderful, satisfying the terrible hunger in a way nothing else could. She took only what she needed, hyper-aware of Lucian's presence, of his hand on her back, reminding her to stop. When she pulled away, Helena's wrist healed almost immediately, and the older vampire smiled. "Well done. Most newborns can't stop themselves the first time. She's not most newborns," Lucian said quietly, pride evident in his voice. The days that followed were an education in being a vampire. Lucian taught her to control her strength, to move without breaking things, to hunt without killing.
Morgana helped her learn to fight with her new abilities, turning her from a competent warrior into something truly formidable. And slowly, carefully, she was allowed to see Hope again. The reunion was emotional. Hope, now 2 years old, didn't fully understand why Seraphina had been gone, but she threw her little arms around her guardian's neck and refused to let go. "Sarah!" she cried, her voice muffled against Seraphina's shoulder. "Missed you!" "I missed you too, little one." Seraphina held the child carefully, hyper-aware of her new strength, terrified of hurting her. But Hope was unafraid, chattering happily about all the things she'd done with Helena, showing off a new word she'd learned. Lucian watched from the doorway, and when Seraphina met his gaze, she saw wonder in his eyes. Later that night, when Hope was asleep and they were alone, he pulled Seraphina into his arms. "You're handling this better than I dared hope," he said softly. "I have good teachers." She looked up at him, marveling at how she could now see him clearly even in the darkness. "And I have you." "Forever," he murmured, kissing her forehead. "You have me forever now." "Is it strange," she asked, "that I don't regret it? I thought I'd mourn my humanity, but I just feel free." "Not strange." Lucian's arms tightened around her. "Just proof that you were always meant for this, for me, for this life." "For eternity," Seraphina corrected, and felt him smile against her hair. "For eternity," he agreed. 5 years passed in what felt like a blink. Seraphina grew into her vampire nature, becoming one of Lucian's most trusted advisors. She advocated for better treatment of humans in the kingdom, pushing for laws that protected them from abuse. Some of the old guard resisted, but Lucian backed her completely, and gradually, changes were made. Hope grew from a toddler into a bright, fearless child who ran through the castle like she owned it. She never knew a time when Seraphina wasn't vampire, and she accepted it as naturally as children accepted everything strange and wonderful about the world. She called Lucian uncle, though he was so much more than that. Protector, teacher, the closest thing to a father she would ever know. The hunters didn't disappear, but their attacks became less frequent. Word had spread that the Vampire King's consort was formidable in her own right, that she couldn't be killed easily, and that anyone who tried would face the wrath of the entire kingdom. Some hunters gave up. Others went underground, biding their time. But for now, there was peace. On a cool autumn evening, 5 years to the day since Seraphina had been brought before Lucian's throne as a thief, they stood together in the castle gardens. Hope was inside with Helena, being read a bedtime story. The night was clear, stars bright overhead, and the night-blooming flowers filled the air with their sweet scent. "I never thought I'd be here," Seraphina said softly, leaning against Lucian's chest. "That night, when they dragged me before you, I was certain I'd die." "I almost let you," Lucian admitted. "It would have been easier, cleaner, one less complication in my kingdom." "But you didn't." "But I didn't." He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. "Do you know what I saw when I looked at you that night? A girl who was ready to die for a child that wasn't hers. Someone who chose compassion over self-preservation. I'd forgotten that humans were capable of such things. And now? Now you've reminded me every day for 5 years." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. "You've made me better, Seraphina. You and Hope both. You've given me a family again, a purpose beyond just ruling. You've given me back my life." "We saved each other," Seraphina said, rising up to kiss him. "You gave us a home. We gave you a reason to live. Fair trade, I think. More than fair." He kissed her back, slow and deep, then pulled away with a laugh. "Come, let's go check on our daughter." "Your daughter," Seraphina corrected teasingly. "I'm just the guardian." "No." Lucian took her hand, leading her back toward the castle. "She's ours. In every way that matters, she's ours." They climbed the stairs to Hope's room and found her already asleep, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit that had been Elara's. Helena had left a candle burning, casting soft shadows across the child's peaceful face. "She's going to be extraordinary," Seraphina whispered. "Like her mother's," Lucian agreed, "both of them." They stood there for a while, watching Hope sleep, two immortals marveling at the fragile, beautiful life they'd chosen to protect. Outside, the world continued its eternal dance between darkness and light, but here, in this moment, there was only peace. Seraphina thought of the girl she'd been, desperate and starving, willing to steal to save a life. She thought of the vampire king who had been ready to die before she'd reminded him why living mattered. And she thought of the child sleeping peacefully, unaware of her very existence had saved them both. "Thank you," she said softly. Lucian glanced at her questioningly. "For seeing me that night, for sparing me, for giving us this chance." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "No, my love, thank you. For stealing bread, for refusing to give up, for reminding me that even monsters can be redeemed." They left Hope's room hand in hand, two immortals walking through corridors that would be theirs for centuries to come. Behind them, a child dreamed of adventures and happy endings. Ahead of them, eternity stretched out, no longer lonely, no longer cold.